All right, so welcome to grape pruning and growing. And so why do we grow grapes in Western Washington? Well, mainly because of the coastal maritime climate we have here. We have the mild, wet winters, the wet springs, dry summers, wet falls, and all kinds of microclimates. We were just talking about the microclimates earlier. And just in a 30-mile radius, it can be 10 degrees difference or 20 degrees difference depending on where you're at and your altitudes. So these are the topics we're going to cover. Site selection, site preparation, choosing plants, types, characteristics, varieties, structure, trellising, planting, fertilization, irrigation, training methods, pruning, bud wiping, tasks, shoot thinning, fruit thinning, hedging, and leaf pulling, and then harvest, disease, and pests. So a lot of topics. So one of the most important things we want to do when we decide we're going to plant grapes is we want to have a good site to select from or where we want to put the grapes at. So the first consideration is you want to have water availability. And July through September, as we all know, living in Western Washington, that is a great decrease during that time frame. It's fine during the other months, but July and through September, it's very, very low, so we have to have water availability there. And then the other important thing we have to watch out for is the frost. The predicted frost day, the last day is 18 April. And the predicted first frost day is 2 November. So that gives us 197 frost-free days. Well, that's a tongue twister. And then most grapes require 150 frost-free days. Location, if you're going to put on a hill, you want to make sure that hill's a south-facing slope with good air circulation and full sun. Soil characteristics, you want very good drainage and sandy, gravelly soil. So you want more like the one on the left than the right. More about site selection. And Gary, I think we can have our first survey question.
And so for this, it's one answer. Go ahead, Art.
Okay, yeah, there's only one answer on this one. Which direction are grapes oriented? So which way do you want to plant your grapes? Which way do the grapes want to go? And all you have to do is click either east and west or north and south and submit.
Nobody will know your answers. It's completely anonymous.
And Alice can't play.
Okay, we have, I'm going to go ahead and end it, and there you go, Art.
All right, so it says east and west, 31% said, and north and south, 69%. So that's, okay, so we're going to find out real quick here. So orientation plan, you want to make sure you have room to grow your grapes. So as you can see this picture here on the right, they've got a pretty good space there. So as you're growing your grapes, you want to make sure that one row doesn't shade the other row. And plus it gives you room to walk through. You also want to know what type of grape you want to plant. You want to know whether it's a table, a juicing, or a wine grape. And then you got to plan your planting and your trellising methods. So this is all the things you want to decide before you start figuring out what kind of grapes you want. And then there's your answer. Rows have a north and south orientation So you get the full sun going over top on both sides of those grape rows. Site preparation. So this bottom picture is quite, that's a lot of work. I mean, there's no weeds in your grape rows, and you just got pathways there that have some grass, but you're talking a lot of work keeping that all weeded out. First thing you want to do is you want to find out what type of soil you have, and grapes need a 6.5 to 6.8 pH. Grapes are also light nitrogen feeders. So what they're saying here is cultivate area 1 year prior to planting. So you want to get everything weed free where you want to put these grapes, where your grape rows are going in. You want to get this all cleared, ready to go. So that's what they're talking this 1 year prior. You want to remove all your competing vegetation, and your biggest concern is the first year. Soil testing should be done approximately every 2 to 3 years. The best way to figure out your soil is take it to a laboratory, and I'm going to show you, I've called around this year for the Western Washington area, and I've only found one good lab so far that was very, it was the cheapest around, and this is at simplysoiltesting.com. A couple of the other places have increased their prices up to $36 to $40 now, but Simply Soil Testing was pretty cheap. The most important thing I can stress about this analysis that you get is understand what the analysis means. So when you get this paperwork back, you need to talk to somebody there so they can explain this analysis to you and tell you exactly what it means and how much nutrients to add and all this stuff that all this information is going to give you in this data is for. There are test kits available out there, and one of them is a Rapitest you can buy at Ace Hardware or Home Depot or different spots like that, but it's just an approximation. Your soil, it only gives you your primary nutrients, and it only gives you your pH levels. And once again, it's only an approximation. It doesn't tell you exactly where you're sitting. And a lot of times with these test kits, you got to be aware if the little capsules you get are out of date. So you make sure you test the shelf life on the box before you buy it, if you do go that way. Okay, this is at Simply Soil Testing. I called them January 21st, and these are the prices they gave me over the phone. And they have an online service. It's very easy to use, and you'd have to pay shipping for the soil, and that's usually about $8. But the basic soil, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you. For those people that are having trouble seeing the screen because it's not, if you look in the upper right-hand corner and it says view, if you hit that, and it will say view of the speaker, that will bring up the slide presentation so it fills the screen. So if you've got it small, you might want to do that. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Gary. So they have a basic soil test for $16, and then the one down below that, which one was I looking at? Oh, the complete test is $32, and that's through the Simply Soil Testing. And this is a rapid test. I use this quite a bit. You just have, when you run this test, you have to make sure you do it exactly as the instructions say. And a lot of times you have to really watch your color changes. So I'm colorblind, so I can see shade change very easily. So that helps me out a lot when I'm doing this test. But a lot of people do not like these tests because of their inaccuracies. And these tests run about $10 to $14 per kit, and you get 10 capsules per each test you do, so you get 40 capsules total. and it's not precise. The best thing about this whole test kit is the little, you get a piece of paper in there that has 450 plants on there, and it tells you all the pH levels for over 450 plants. That's what I like about that kit also. We're going to be doing a class coming up on soil testing and fertilization. That's coming up here in the near future. And go ahead with the next survey question, Gary. Okay, this is growing degree days. Does one growing degree day, and that's a GDD, equal one calendar day? And yes or no? So just click on your answer and submit it. And once again, it's completely anonymous.
Five seconds. There you go, Art.
All right, thank you. We had 38% yes and 63% said no. All right, good answers. We're going to cover it real quick here. Okay, a growing degree day is the amount of heat that's available to plants during its growth season. So what grapes are concerned about is they have a 50 degree baseline. So that's what grapes are based on, is that 50 degrees. So Cowlitz area, growing degree days, averages 1864 to 1930. And according to the Winkler scale, it's about 1,500 to 2,000. So the Winkler scale gives it a little bit more wider range. However, these growing degree days are very important when you're buying grapes if the grape has it listed what it requires. So we're going to cover this in the next few slides. So your growing degree day is the high temperature plus the low temperature. You divide it by 2, and then minus 50 gives you your amount of growing degree days. And here's an example. If your high temperature for the day was 70, your low temperature was 50, you add the two together, you get 120. You divide by 2, gives you 60 degrees. Then you minus that base 50, and that gives you 10 growing degree days for that day. So the answer was no, one growing degree days does not equal one calendar day. Grapes use a growing degree calendar from 1st of April to 7 November. So that's why you add up all these growing degree days, and that's where it gets you in that 1864 to 1930, or by the Winkler scale, 1,500 to 2,000. And you can use this other site that Alice gave me last year. I think she gave me this last year, but I just checked it a couple days ago, and it's still active and it still works fine. So if you go to this website, this Greencast online, and I have this also in our references, so you'll be able to see that later on. But you type in that hyperlink, go in there, and just put your zip code in, and it'll calculate out your growing degree days. Okay, choosing your plants. Your biggest thing that you want to know is what you want to have your grapes for. Do you want to have them for table grapes? Do you want to have them for juicing? Or do you want to have it for wine drinking? And we're going to cover different ways of acquiring plants. You can either create your own from cuttings, or purchase 1 to 2 year olds, or self-rooted versus grafting. And all you have to do if you're buying your plants, just make sure you have healthy roots. Okay, we're ready for the next survey question, Gary. Okay, which grapes would grow well in long view? Multiple choice. So you have the Canadas, the Himrod, the Interlaken, the Reliance at 1,500 to 2,000. You have a Concord that has a growing degree day of 2,000. You have a Noir, a Chardonnay, a Riesling, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last one, but it has 2,000 to 2,500. And then your Cabernet and your Merlots at 2,500. So just go ahead and mark this as multiple answers. Go ahead and mark your choices.
Yeah, so by multiple choice means you can pick as many answers as you want. There you go, Art.
All right, thank you. Okay, 89% picked the first one, the Kennedys. 61% picked the Concord. 44% picked the third one down, and 6% good, very good. You guys are paying attention. So as you see, as we went down further and further, the growing degree days got longer, and that's less likely those grapes are going to succeed. So the first two were the best choices. And I've seen Riesling grow around here, and the Noir, I've seen those growing also. I'm not sure about the Chardonnay and the Gewürztraminer, and I've never seen the lower ones, any of the lower ones. So we're going to cover those right now. There's your Concord at 2,000, your Canadas. Now, if you remember, it was a 1,500 to 2,000 was your Winkler scale. So if you're getting above this 2,000, the grapes aren't going to do very well, unless you have a heck of a microclimate for them. Okay, the different types of grapes. We've got three types. You have European, American, and French hybrids. Characteristics of European: they're used for wine and juices. These grapes grow upright. Short internodes, that's the distance between the nodes. Larger diameter fruiting canes, and they are considered to be less hardy than American grapes. And here's some examples of some European: the Sigaribi and Chardonnays. Then we get into the American grapes. Used for table and juice. Longer internodes, so the distance between the nodes are longer. Smaller diameter canes. They're cold hardy, so that's why American does so well. And here's some examples: Kennedys, Himrod, Interlaken, Reliance. And there's more out there. French hybrids, they're mainly used for wine. They have a small berry, trailing and upright growth, longer internodes, smaller diameter fruiting canes. And these are your Baca Noir and your Marshall Faute. Table varieties. There's a lot of table varieties. And I've got Interlaken, I've got Himrod, and let's see, Ramelli's. Okay, I have Reliance and I have Einset, and they do well up here in Winlock. I have Cannabis, Vanessa, Saturn works real well, and I've got Venus. Okay, wine varieties. These are 1,600 to 1,650, so these would do very well in this area for wine grapes. Chardonnays, 1650 to 1900. And the Agrias, they do fine in this area. Above 1900, you're starting to get out of that growing degree days. So you have to be careful there. And here's a great list on how to prune the grapes and what types they are and what they're used for. And that's in that handout, the 17-page handout that Gary has. A little bit of structure of the grapes. And there's 2 slides on this. So that's basically what a grape vine and plant is going to look like as it's growing. Okay, as your cane grows, if you look at this, your 6 through your 12 are your most fruitful buds on this type of grapevine. And this is a French hybrid cane. So not all canes are the same. You have to do your research. You have to know what type of grape you got, and you have to know where your most fruitful buds are. So this is a French hybrid, and this 6 through 12 is your best. If you get to the 1 to 3, they're not as fruitful. And then you get the 4 through 5, it gets a little more fruitful. And then as you get away from that number 12, it starts declining. So if you're growing grapes, you want to keep that 6 through 12 if you're using this type of grape. All right, this is a little bit about trellising. So your end posts. And we're basically going to show you 2 different types of trellising here that I've seen. And this can span almost 16 or 600 feet if you do these 2 methods here. So your end posts are 5 to 6 inches in diameter. Your line posts are 3 to 4 inches in diameter. Your fruiting wire is recommended to use a 10 to 12 gauge high tensile strength wire. And then you have catch wires. And I just use the same tensile strength wire on the catch wires too. But this is what it looks like right here. And once again, this can span up to 600 feet if you do it correctly. And then you're going to have strainers, earth anchors, and brace pins. And I'm going to show you pictures of these too. So this is what a strainer looks like. And if you look at the very right-hand side of that picture, you can see 2 strainers up there to keep tension on that wire. And then auger is going to be in the next picture. And then the brace pins, you can just barely see. They're up on the right-hand side. And I don't know if you can see my pointer, but there's a pin there and a pin there. And that's what a brace pin looks like. Okay, here's your H brace. And once again, this can span 600 feet if you do it correctly. These line posts, you can go 20 to 30 feet distance between them. And there's the other one. It's angled. And that's where the earth auger comes in. If you look at this earth auger right here, it's going straight down. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'd put the earth auger, or that screw anchor, whatever they want to call it, I'd put it the same angle as your wire is. So it's pulling against that surface tension of that anchor. That's the only thing I'd do different on this right here, though. Okay, plant rows north and south once again. Best time to plant is early spring. I've planted in September. I've planted many times in September, so I didn't have to water them all during the winter. If you plant in early spring, you have to really pay attention to the water. You want to make sure all vegetation is removed again first year. If you buy bare root, make sure the roots aren't dry and make sure you spread them out without bending. If they're too long, you trim them. And if you're already doing propagated plants, you want to be careful you don't break the roots while digging. If potted, plant at the same height. If grafted, don't bury the graft. Most roots are 18 inches deep. Space plants 6 to 8 feet apart in a row. And that again depends on the length of your vine. Separate your rows 8 to 10 feet. That's just to prevent shading. Okay, when you initially plant this grape, you want to make sure that the trunk stays straight. So that's what they're talking about. You want to stake it and train it to go right up that stake. You can use a grow tube that increases the heat around the plant, and it also protects it from deer, actually. And then you want to use black plastic to prevent weeds from coming in. The goal is to establish a strong trunk. Whoops, I'm going to back up one more on this. If you see here what they did, they picked this one going up and they pruned it off mainly because it didn't make it up to the wire quite. And they're cutting it down here on the bottom where those two cuts are. And this is going to be your only cane going up. That's the strongest cane they picked. If it makes the fruiting wire, well, we'll discuss that in a little bit down the road here. Okay, fertilization. You want to fertilize grapes sparingly? More problems are done with overfeeding than underfeeding. Fertilize each plant approximately with half an ounce to 1 ounce of nitrogen. So if you're using a 16-16-16, you want to measure this out. You don't just want to guess it. So you calculate out each plant. So to calculate, you want to take that 16-16-16, so that's 16% nitrogen, 16% phosphorus, and 16% potassium. And then you want to take that 1 ounce, which is required, and you want to divide that by that 16%. And that's how you calculate that 16.3 ounces per plant. So that tells you the amount of fertilizer you need per plant. You can also use manure or compost. And that 16-16-16, it means your NPK, and it means your green foliage is the nitrogen, your phosphorus is your roots, and your potassium helps to grow the internals of the plant. Okay, the second year. So the second year you increase the dosage a little bit more of the fertilizer, and they recommend to go 1 to 1.5 ounce per plant. So you're going to do the same calculations, only you're going to use the 1.5 this time. And okay, let me back up a little bit. It went too fast. So if you calculate it out, you divide that 1.5 into the 16 into the 1.5, you come out with the 9.4 ounces is how you calculate that out. So when you put the fertilizer down, you just go around a circle around the trunk of the grape, and you keep it about 18 inches from the trunk. Keep it away from the trunk, 6 to 18 inches away from the trunk. So that's your circle. The inner circle will be 6 inches, 18 inches maximum out. Be careful not to get the fertilizer right up to the trunk. And the best time to fertilize is at bud break. And if you're at the store and you're trying to think of which way the NPK goes, this is just a simple way to remember it, NPK, and it's up, down, and all around. So if you're looking at the NPK, just think up is for your leaf. That's your nitrogen. Down is for your rooting system. That's phosphorus. And then your potassium, which is K, is for the internal system of the plant. That's the easiest way to remember if you get messed up on it when you're trying to look for nitrogen or for fertilizer. Irrigation. Okay, I think we're ready for one of the other survey questions, Gary. What is the best method for watering grapes? And just click your answer and submit it. And it's either drip irrigation, hand watering, overhead watering, or soaker hoses.
There you go, Art.
All right, thank you. Okay, the best method for watering grapes, I got 85% was drip irrigation. Yeah, nobody wants to hand water. Okay, I agree with that 100%. Overhead watering, 10%. And soaker hoses. Soaker hoses is okay. You're just going to get a lot of weeds. Overhead watering, you have to be careful of viruses that you can, because the leaves are going to get wet. You got to make sure you watch for viruses and other kind of diseases getting onto your grapes. So soaker or drip irrigation is the best method to use. First year is most critical for watering. Avoid overwatering, and drip irrigation is preferred. And there's a sample of how to set it up. And you can buy drip irrigation where it's the spaces of the drips or the holes are longer, shorter, depends on what you're looking for. Some are 6 inches, some are 12 inches, depends on what you're buying. But that's the best, that's an easy method to set up, and it's just going to drip down through. Soaker hoses, you just lay across the bottom next to your plant, and that'll work also. Stay clear of overhead watering. And after the first year, you can decrease your watering. Training methods. You have a top wire cordon, and it looks like this. And also in that handout, this is going to break them down. Usually your top wire cordon is your best choice. That's the mostly used. I don't want to say your best choice. It depends on the grape that you're growing. But a lot of people use this top wire cordon. Geneva double curtain. The umbrella conifen. Forearm conifen. And vertical shoot positioning. And then this is what I use here. I have arbors. And that seems to work really well for what I'm doing. But I only have 6 grape plants. Training method is going to depend on your wires. How many, when you're training it, the number of wires you use. Table grapes take a different type of wiring. Fruiting canes are horizontal. And this is your wiring system that's set up for this type of grape. So you're going to run your wire at approximately 5 feet. I think it's 5.5 feet to 6 feet on this one. And you can run your cordon out on this wire, and then your spurs are going to hang down, or your canes are going to hang down from that. Cut back 2 to 3 buds if the cane did not reach the fruiting wire. This is when you're starting your plants. If the wire was reached, you want to cut 3 to 4 inches above the fruiting wire through the node. And then you want to tie off the cane to the wire. And you want to train your vines to the trellising system that you selected. And then you want to supplement with water. So here's when you're going to develop your cordons. So here's your first, you're trying to get this trunk to reach the top wire. That's your goal. So that first year you're trying to get it up to the top wire. If it reaches that top wire, it's going to spread out like this on you. And then you're going to cut it back. And then you're going to train it to look something like this after this is after the second year, after you reach that top wire. Types of pruning tools. The best type of pruning tools to use is a bypass pruner. And that's where the blades bypass each other and you don't crush the stem or the vine as you're cutting it. Loppers, once again, I recommend using bypass loppers. And once you use them, you want to make sure you disinfect. So you can spray them with a 70% alcohol or use a 10% Clorox solution, but just be aware, if you use a Clorox solution, that Clorox solution is very corrosive on your tools. So once you use a Clorox solution, you want to wash them off, and then you want to WD-40 them after that and oil them up. And you want to keep your tools sharp as you're pruning because you want a clean cut. So you can use the files either way you want to go. I use a hand file on mine, and I just put it in a vise and I just shave it down or shine it up, clean it up, and then I spray it with WD-40 for my next use. But if you're out in the field and your pruners get dull, that Corona, the one you can just keep in your pocket right there, is very nice to use, and it's quick and easy to handle. Winter pruning. We're going to get into types of pruning here. Okay, grapes are produced from buds that will grow into shoots on 1-year-old canes. The most fruitful canes are the ones that are exposed to light during the growing season. These canes are usually thicker than a pencil. Mature plants you need to prune every year to remove all the growth except the new 1-year-old fruiting canes. We're going to discuss here shortly on the 2 different types of pruning methods also. Okay, pruning vines should be done at this time frame between January and the 1st of March. So the 2 types of pruning methods we're going to talk about are cane pruning and spur pruning. So the above picture is a cane prune and the bottom one is a spur prune. And if you remember that table, different types of grapes take a different type of pruning. So we're going to cover them both. So for a cane, it shows you here what to cut away on the left-hand picture, and for a spur, it shows you on the right-hand picture what to cut away. And these are just reference diagrams, just to give you an idea. We're going to go through each method pretty thorough. Okay, and as you look down these 2 pictures here, the left side is cane pruning, the right side is spur pruning. And you can see at the end results, they pretty much look the same. However, it's just a completely different method. One, you're having a long cordon come out, and the other ones you're not. And we're going to talk about them as we go. So spur pruning. So when you spur prune, it's done on vines that retain one or two pairs of long canes, a permanent cordon trained along your trellising system. So these canes are always there. They stay there permanently. Each winter, new canes that have grown along that permanent cordon are cut back, and you want to just make sure you keep the spurs there. And you want to prune them back to 2 buds. In spring, new growth develops from the buds on the spur. Prune along the main canes to leave 2 to 3 buds, each 4 to 6 inches apart. Leave no more than 20 to 80 buds per plant, depending on the plant you have. And then you want to remove all 1-year-old wood. So this is the starting of a spur prune. So you got your plant, you planted it, and it's starting to grow, and you see the middle picture has reached up to the top wire. So you're going to cut your bottom canes off, and then you're going to trim this thing back to 3 to 4 inches above the wire. And the third picture is what it looks like after you do all your cuts. So then your cordons are going to start to form. They're going to follow out your wire, and then you're going to get these spurs growing off of it. You want to cut those back to two spurs each. And then this is what's going to happen on the 5th year and onwards. So these spurs are going to keep growing. They're going to keep growing out. So they're going to start escalating away from that cordon as you go. Eventually, you're going to want to take those spurs away because they're going to get too long, and you're going to want to start new spurs. But this is as you're going and as the grape is growing year after year after year. And that's taking you through the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th year. And it just keeps going and going and going. So that's basically spur pruning. Now we're going to get into the cane prune. Cane pruning cut back 90% of last year's growth. You first remove the dead 2-year-old canes, and then you want to select your well-formed canes and head them down the wire. The canes you select should be 1-year-old wood. When in doubt about a cultivar, cane prune it. Okay, to cane prune, select 2 to 4 new fruiting canes per wire. Cut back each. So you have 15 buds per cane, and then 20 to 30 buds per plant. And that's for your wine grapes, and 40, you want 50 to 80 for table grapes per plant. Cane pruning is pretty easy. Okay, here's how we're going to start it. Same method. Once you reach your wire, you're going to cut it back to about 4 inches above the wire, and then your canes are going to start forming out on the third picture again. And as they grow, then you're going to watch them, and you're going to make your cuts as needed. So third year, look where all the dotted lines where you're going to be cutting back to. That's what it's going to look like and then the 4th year, you're going to select your canes and let them go out. And this is starting the plant from scratch. And there's going on the 4th year, the 5th year. and continuing on. You're going to keep selecting your canes as they grow and keep picking 2 canes to go out there each year. So when you're growing your grapes, you're going to have up to 4 canes growing on these wires, and then you're going to cut them back at the end of the fruiting season, so you'll have 2 left. Propagation. Propagation is one of the easiest things for on grapes there is. If you make cuttings and you take cuttings and you prune your grapes back, you've got all kinds of ways to grow more grapes. So you're going to look for your leaf scar, you're going to cut it. There's your leaf scar at the bottom of the leaf. You want to make a flat cut, and then you want to cut up 3 to 4, go up 3 to 4 nodes, and then make a diagonal cut. And that diagonal cut's going to indicate your top part of your sign wood. And you simply just soak the base in water for 24 hours, and then you want to scrape the base with a knife, and then you want to plant. You don't have to use a rooting solution. You just put it in a planting pot. And what I usually do when I put it in the soil, I push it all the way down to the bottom. I hit the bottom and I pull it up about 1 inch. And that way I keep it off the bottom. And you don't want to disturb it. Just let it sit. And this should be diagrams of how to do it. So we're going to make our cut. So here's your first cut. Then they went up about, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 buds, and made another cut. And then they're going to cut back and make a diagonal cut. And there's your base, your flat cut. Scar the end. And then put it in water to soak for 24 hours and plant it. And you notice they're putting 2 buds above the ground here and 2 buds below. I've put 1 bud above ground and 2 below. It doesn't matter how you do that. Just make sure you got a couple buds down below in the dirt, in the soil. So you notice here the bottom of that sign wood is not on the bottom of the pot. It's up off the pot, bottom of the pot. And also, I've seen, when you're doing this, I've seen leaf formations form during that year, and that's kind of deceiving because the leaf will still form and there's no roots down below. Don't touch the wood, let it alone, don't pull it up, don't do anything because you could end up damaging the roots. Just let it be. Okay, shoot thinning. Every bud, every node.
Art?
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't want to get too far away from it. I have a couple of questions when you were back on pruning.
Sure.
One question, why does it look like 3 to 4 wires are strung when only the top wire is being used?
I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. You talking here?
Tricia, she's saying yes.
Yes, I see 4 wires, but you're only going to the first.
You're going up to the top.
Wire.
Okay, this top wire is going to support your main cordons going out. And then everything's going to drop down. So your grapes are going to form on these bottom wires. This bottom wire, this is just a system that they chose. A lot of people will hedge this thing depending on the wire distance from each other. So if you got your wire, if your cane going across that top wire and it goes down to the second and third wire, a lot of people will just prune everything off that bottom wire there, and that's how they hedge it. But this is just a sample they use here.
Thank you.
You don't need that many wires. You can it depends on what type of grape you're growing. You can go 2 wires, 3 wires. It's your decision.
The other question is, which one is the fruiting wire?
your support wire is your top wire.
Okay.
And so
And
the
somebody
grape
has
will hang
something,
down.
what does scarring the end with the knife do to the cutting when propagating?
That ends up helping you to establish roots out of the scar.
That's all my questions. You're all caught up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is where we were, and each node of the grape usually has 3 buds coming out. So when you're looking at your grape, you want to make sure that you keep I always wait until the buds are formed and the shoots start coming out, and then I thin it then. I take the weakest shoot and I get rid of the 2 weakest shoots and keep the longest. That's usually the easiest way to thin. Okay, that's just something that is reiterating what we already discussed. So you want to do shoot thinning in the summer. You want to prune to a certain number of buds per vine, and that's going to be in accordance with the grape that you're growing. And the reason you want to thin shoots is because you want all that energy to go to the shoots that you're going to produce the fruit from. And you can just snap them off. You don't have to prune them off. And just be careful you don't take off the wrong shoots. But you'll see them as your grapes are growing. If you're watching your grapes, you're okay. So yes, you do want to do your thinning. April to May. Remove all but 1 or 2 clusters per shoot. And that's just to make your fruit bigger and better. Thin fruit before they bloom. Fruit thinning can also be done later in the season if you feel you haven't pruned the vine severely enough. Berry size will increase. And also your grape clusters will ripen sooner. And then this is where I was talking about hedging. There's the explanation of hedging. And then each cluster that is left on a fruiting shoot cane requires 12 to 14 leaves. So you just want to make sure you get photosynthesis occurring on the fruit as you're going and on the plant. And bud wiping, you want to remove all dormant buds on the trunk below so they don't start growing vines out or cordons out. You want to make sure that those are wiped clean. Leaf pulling, remove 2 to 4 leaves per cluster. Goal is to expose your grapes to light. Remove before ripening, and minimum 12 to 14 leaves per cluster. So there's where the grapevines were not thinned or the leaf pulling didn't occur on the left, and then what happens, what it looks like on the right. And what it does is gives you good sun exposure. And in the afternoon sun, you want to be careful. You want to make sure you leave some leaves there to keep your grapes covered so they don't get sunburned. And there's where you don't want to remove the leaves on the other side so you don't get them sunburned on the west side. Okay, several signs of maturing. These are really easy signs. Birds are eating them. Your color changes of the grape. The supporting stem turns brown. I don't know about you, but when I'm down there on the grapevines, I got to taste them as I'm going through. So I usually taste my grapes quite a bit. And usually when they taste good to me is when I pick them. And then you can use a refractometer. A refractometer, excuse me. Okay, if you're using a refractometer, the brick scale reads in degrees. And there's a sample on the right here that shows you how the scale is. And you're looking for increments. And it should say, okay, for wine, it's 22 or above. And for table, it's 17 to 19. Diseases, you got to worry about not very much on diseases for grapes. And you can take care of it by keeping your canopy managed, the way you water, and be careful of using herbicides. They're very sensitive, and you can get distorted leaves if you're starting to spray stuff down to try to have for weed control. The biggest ones I've seen around are powdery mildew, crown gall, and then botrytis. Pests, once again, July, August are critical for the pests, wasps and hornets, two-legged predators, birds, rodents, voles. And then they get this aphid-like insect that feeds on the roots. You got to be careful of that. And also the other one's the Irrigation mite. Here's some frequently asked questions, and we're going to open it up for questions. If you go to the store, why are my grapes always smaller than the stores are? And then it says, what I found out about that is many commercial growers usually put a chemical on there or a growth hormone, and it makes the berry size enhance. Why do table grapes taste sweeter than wine grapes when their sugar content is lower? And that's usually because of the acid content. And then here's one of the best questions I get asked a lot about. What pruning technique do I use if I don't know grape cultivar I have? And we come up with this idea, and it was one of the best ideas we come up with. And you prune one arm of the trunk one way by a spur prune, and then you prune the other side by a cane prune, and then you just determine which method is the best for the grape. And then you switch over after you figure it out. But that was one of the questions that came. That's a question that comes up all the time. How do I prune it? So if you do one side one way and the other side the other way, and then just watch your grapes and see which one is the best pruning method, then shift it over to the best. So these were all my references.